wearing my hat, my New York City, who's governing New York City right now. Um, and I've got with me Priyansh, who, I don't know, do you want to say, I know so truth about us, we've never met in person. This is purely the internet. But he's written two pieces already for 11 People, one about the Ambanis, who has sort of a chokehold on the IPL and broadcasting and various other properties, and a link to the ruling party. Priyansh will break this down in a minute. And then he just wrote the piece, which I really want him to talk about, which is about what he calls cricket's gross domestic product. I think that's a great title, which is Hindu nationalism. So I want him to break that down. The whole point of this is so people can go read the piece.
Yes.
But I don't know. Do you want to just say, because I know you're also a student, and you also have a background in journalism. I don't know if
Yeah.
you want to say more about that. I don't know if you want to invite the trolls by doing this, but it might be useful. Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah. Thanks yeah, for having me on, Sean. So I used to be a journalist in India. I used to actually cover cricket and football a lot as well, obviously, which is called soccer in North America. And I used to work for the newspaper, The Hindu. Then I started, when I was a freelancer, I used to write about many of the issues that I discuss in the latest piece for 11 Named People. Now I'm also finishing my PhD at the University of Toronto, where I'm based right now. I'm doing a long-term historical study of the development of Indian sport through especially the lens of tracing it through the relationship between state and capital. And I look at particularly three major events that the two Asian Games and the Commonwealth Games India hosted. Mainly to arrive at a point of trying to understand the present, moment with India trying to host the Olympics, which obviously I wrote about in the Ambani piece. So yeah, so that's what I do, and also now trying to do more public-facing work. So I also co-host the End of Sport podcast
Oh yeah,
as
we
well.
should shout out that podcast. I'm on an episode that's coming up, right?
Yes, yeah. I mean, the episode's out tomorrow.
Am I
So
supposed to tell people that?
Yes, indeed. The episode is out tomorrow. I mean, tomorrow's in the morning. People will be able to watch it. Now it's also on YouTube. We talk a lot about the politics of football, especially following AFCON, but also looking ahead to the World Cup.
And just, do you want to shout out the two other presenters of that program? Because I think they're really nice people. Maybe say a little
Yeah.
about who they are and what they do.
Yeah. So in the End of Sport podcast was started by Nathan Calman Lamb and Derek Silva, who they've been doing it since 2020, if I recall correctly. And this is a podcast now nearing close to 200 episodes.
Right.
I joined the team recently. Nathan and Derek also have a great book called The End of College Football, where they really trace, how college football has been a site of exploitation of especially athletic labor at universities in the US. And then a couple of years after the podcast was launched, Johanna Mellis joined the podcast, whose work on IOC and imperialism is great. And just before I joined, Anna Posberg, who's right now and based in Florida, and whose work, especially on trans inclusion sport, is very important. So it's a team of 5, and we're now putting out basically 2 shows a week. So we're quite active. And yeah, like I said, you can also watch episodes on YouTube.
Okay, introductions aside, I have a couple of quick questions because I know we don't have like an enormous amount of time. Probably we'll do this for about 20 to 30 minutes, and we'll see how this plays out. I'm just going to throw like a big question at you because, okay, so the backdrop for all of this is this. Priyansh wrote this piece called Cricket's Gross Domestic Product, Hindu Nationalism, and the kind of, I don't know what you want to hang it around is that Indian cricket dominates globally right now. There's an immense wealth coming out of Indian cricket, top tier organization. Anybody who follows cricket, basically the European Champions League or the Premier League of cricket, it gets played in India, the IPL. And then what India's done is then it kind of creates franchises for that in South Africa, in the Caribbean. And I stand on the correction. Is it also the case for Australia's Big Bash, or is that's a thing on its own? Just before you answer, make this part of your answer, and then quickly. Okay. But what Priyansh is saying is that there's a way in which the Indian state and its apparatus is shaping international cricket way more than we can imagine. So my first question, which is always something I like to say to people, but then I'm like, I'm not sure if one could argue that. Can you say, is there a way that you could say what India did to cricket is a kind of a decolonial act?
Yeah, I mean, this is thanks for that question. This is one of my favorite questions these days of thinking about what decolonization looks like in terms of cricket. So just on the point about Australia, so Australia is still able to run its own ship, but there have been, discussions about getting foreign investment in, but England has managed to do it. So the 100 competition will have 49% stake, which has been pretty much picked up by Indian for investors or Indian origin investors. Um, so I think cricket obviously is an interesting sport to think with because it's probably is the only popular sport where the power center shifted from the global north to the global south, right? Like this game was, so intimately associated with the British Empire, and then especially starting from the 90s, but decisively in the over the last 20 years, the power center has shifted to India. This is can be traced even in terms of its, like logistically speaking, because the ICC office now sits in Dubai, where a lot of like Indian, especially Indian wealthy investors, also have put in their own money. But the interesting thing about this kind of this decolonial aspect of cricket is that it's been done on the terms of global capital, especially so because the Indian Premier League, which you mentioned, Sean, is now the premier competition, uh, and it's been running. It'll have its 20th edition this year. Since its emergence and its arrival on the international cricket scene, it has slowly developed to the point that every single cricketer wants to play in it. So India hosts this premier cricket competition. It's also a site. It's not so much just sport because right from its inception, it pitched itself in competition with people who wanted to go out and watch cinema. It wanted to attract a new audience for cricket, young families, women, more women watching cricket, especially because cricket was mainly, associated with a predominantly male audience in India previously. So since cricket's audience and the people that it wanted to reach out changed, it had to be also recast in a way that it would appeal to a wide range of people. So this format, which was already developing a game that would last 3.5 hours, became this kind of site where many of especially following the 2008 recession in India, the number of there was a consolidation of capital, especially a very few wealthy groups were able to grow in power at the expense of others, and then they had this excess capital to be able to invest in a variety of fields. So the IPL becomes a site for that. It also becomes a site for major film stars to be able to put in that money. But as the IPL grows and as these franchises start to turn a profit, also many of these investors start looking for opportunities, just kind of mimicking the development of capitalism, where it's not constrained within a national boundaries. They start looking for international investment opportunities. So that's why now we are in South Africa, in the SA-T20 league, we have teams that basically have the same name, like there's a Sunrisers team, or there's a MI or Mumbai Indians brand. It also travels to the US, where the Major League Cricket exists, and the same has now been seen in the UK. So broadly, the power center has shifted quite decisively. This is a game that's now run by India. So, and obviously India being a former colony of British Empire, that carries a lot of weight in how we understand the development of this game. But it's effectively a power grab by certain wealthy elites, like the democratizing spirit of the game, which something like in an anti-colonial way, if we're thinking about this, especially thinking with, say, CLR James, the democratizing spirit that should have accompanied this development of cricket has not come to pass.
So just to stay with this, what is the role then of England and Australia? You said Australia is doing its own thing at the moment. England is creating this thing called the 100, but Indian investors are also in there. So a lot of people would argue England and Australia used to set the agenda for Test cricket. India has now flipped that, where even Test cricket doesn't have the same value. They have the little asterisk thing, but it feels like some idiosyncratic thing that they're just doing now and then. Is that a correct interpretation, or who, if you want, who's the counterpoint to India now? Because if Australia and England are kind of tainted in a way, right? Because they controlled the game in a certain way for so long, and now India came, changed the game, but we're uneasy about what India is doing. Where is this? Where's the counterpoint going to come from?
Yeah, I mean, England and Australia are an interesting part of the story because they are the old order, but they have remained influential to a reasonable extent, even with India rising. And this is why I think that this is, being done still in collaboration and in cooperation with the old order, as opposed to, kind of a brave new world for cricket. So England and Australia and India came up with this new revenue model in 2014, which was called the Big Three model, which has since developed, over the last 12 years. Effectively now, 50% of the revenue goes to these three boards. And out of that 50%, the 33% belongs to India. So the 50% of the remaining pot is for all of the ICC members, which number over 100. Now, because these three boards are so influential, they get the most revenue, they play each other often. You can even see this in terms of, as Test cricket being more of a prestige thing as opposed to a revenue generating event, that India now gets to play 5 Test matches with England and Australia. I mean, people of my father's generation will always tell the story that whenever England would come to India, they would send like a second string team back in the 70s because they did not think India was fit enough to compete with them. Now that story has changed quite a bit, where playing India is so central, and it's not only for England and Australia, literally everyone who plays international cricket, the away to India, but more importantly, when they host India for Test matches, one days, and T20s particularly, which are the dominant format now. That's such a huge factor in terms of being able to make money that nobody wants to piss India off, basically. Because India could just decide to not come. I mean, South Africa had this situation where India nearly did not travel a few years ago. We've seen this play out with multiple nations, and everyone wants to host India for a multi-format tour where they come and play tests, one days, and T20s. In terms of a counterpoint to this is because of this unequal, power that India holds, being able to claim a third of the revenue of the game. It's been very hard to pose a challenge. So how the previous power grab, or rather the power relation shifted, was that there used to be something called the Asian Bloc in the 90s, where all the Asian countries would come together, and that's how they managed to wrest power, especially from England, but also Australia. Now, because the three powerful are kind of in, they have this coordination going, they have this understanding going, these three powerful boards, England, Australia, and India, there is literally no organized support that exists right now. So that creates the situation for what has panned out in recent weeks.
Can you just like sketch that, like this whole Pakistan, Bangladesh, like in this context, it makes more sense, yeah.
Yeah. So because very few opportunities exist to be able to show and to be able to resist the way things are going. So what happened, especially in Bangladesh, and this was the subject of my piece, where with Bangladesh being kicked out of the T20 World Cup, is that the only Bangladeshi player to be picked up in the Indian Premier League, which we talked about, is the premier domestic, so-called domestic T20 competition, but all the international stars play, barring Pakistan, whose players are basically not picked up by any IPL franchises as a secret understanding. They've never really officially declared this as a policy, but Pakistani cricketers are not welcome. And Bangladesh, because of its relative status in international cricket, very few Bangladeshi cricketers have played. And this year, the only one who was supposed to play was Mustafizur Rahman, who's a very highly skilled fast bowler. Now, he was picked up by the Calcutta franchise, the Kolkata Knight Riders, which is the closest city in terms of the 10 teams that play in this competition to Bangladesh. So, and he's a Bengali-speaking bowler. So, these franchises are also interested in getting players who can speak to their local, fan base. But as soon as he was picked up, BJP legislators started speaking out in public, saying, that we will not accept a Bangladeshi cricketer playing in this league, because India-Bangladesh diplomatic tensions have been quite heated ever since the popular movement in July 2024, which led to the ouster of the previous Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Obviously, over the last week, we've had elections in Bangladesh. Now we have the new Prime Minister there. Sheikh Hasina had very friendly relationship with the Modi regime, and then when she was ousted, she basically fled to India, and India was protecting her. So this was there was already this was a flashpoint. Then there's already been rising rhetoric against Bengali-speaking Muslims who are often branded as Bangladeshis within India. So this anti Bangladeshi migrant rhetoric has been rising. And this has been obviously weaponized by the Hindutva forces in India and the BJP. This summer, two of the states that adjoin Bangladesh, Assam and West Bengal, are going to elections. So the reason why the tensions ramped up to the point that Mustafizur Rahman had to be kicked out was directly linked to the elections. This was, especially BJP politicians within those two states have been amplifying anti-Muslim hate consistently. I mean, we have this AI-generated video going out a couple of weeks ago where the chief minister, who's the head of state for the state of Assam, Himanta Biswa Sarma, he was seen in this AI-generated video where he is pointing a gun at Muslims and shooting at them. So you have this kind of, explicit anti-Islamophobic rhetoric going on. So within this atmosphere, which was already created, Mustafizur Rahman was considered to be, somebody who the BCCI could dispense with. So the BCCI initially asks the franchise to let him go. The franchise resists initially. So when the franchise resists, there's already been a kind of a campaign against one of the co-owners of this franchise, Shah Rukh Khan, who's obviously one of the most well-known faces in India, but who has been targeted by a lot of these right-wing forces. Anyway, so when the franchise refused to listen, the BCCI got the government involved because there is this easy transition between the cricket board and the government, and they forced his ouster. Bangladesh, with already this, this thing that I've laid out with these diplomatic tensions, said nothing doing. If you cannot assure security for one of our players, our whole team will not travel. This was a threat that was issued a month before, and with the fact that this World Cup that's going on right now is being played over two countries between India and Sri Lanka are co-hosting it, all Bangladesh demanded was for their matches to be moved to Sri Lanka. It was a short notice, but ICC has accommodated India within the past year on a short notice when India could play its Champions Trophy games in Dubai. Now, but in this case, because Bangladesh does not have power for the reasons I explained earlier, the ICC basically said that Bangladesh has to accept the schedule as it is, or they are out of the tournament. Bangladesh, because of the current political climate there, where they are not ready to just kowtow to India and just listen to and just follow what India orders, they said, okay, if that's the case, we're out of this tournament. And then Scotland replaced them. Pakistan, which was observing this situation, and Pakistan obviously nearly went to war with India last year, and there have been multiple instances of these tensions being amplified on the cricket pitch in 2025, especially in the Asia Cup, between the two teams, where the players refused to shake hands at the directive of the cricket board, which is obviously an extension of the Indian government. So just to be clear, India started this non-handshake thing. And this continued even yesterday when the two teams played. Pakistan said, well, we see that there's double standards at play, so we will boycott this game. This led to a whole set of parlays behind the scenes. Pakistan effectively realized that it because of these unequal power relations, it could only get so much, but it insisted that Bangladesh will not be sanctioned for its stance. And the ICC was willing to give it that, and that's why Pakistan took its boycott back. But in doing this, what Pakistan was able to show is that this is where the leverage lies over India. The India-Pakistan game is so crucial to the amount of money that broadcasters and sponsors are ready to invest, that if Pakistan refuses to play and this game does not happen, there is going to be a loss-making situation for international cricket. And with the new television deal coming up for renewal in 2027, this was a risk that ICC was not willing to take, because it's hard to judge what is the accurate value of these things, but but there's a common understanding that for the previous deal that is right now is owned by Jio Hotstar, which links to the Ambanis, that they had overpaid for it with a $3 billion amount. So this would allow any broadcaster to be able to negotiate the price down if the India-Pakistan game does not happen. So this is why all the parlays happen, and then we had the game yesterday, but not a memorable cricket contest here.
So, okay, I know we said we're not going to spend an enormous amount of time, but I do have two other quick questions. The one is, it sounds like, I mean, this is so different from, say, like a FIFA or another kind of global organization where where FIFA actually will suspend a national association if there's political interference from the state. But in this case, the story we're getting is like the local level, the way that the local politics in a particular state dictates the way that the international, the ICC operates. I mean, there's a great quote in your piece from the Indian journalist Sarada Ugra, who says the ICC is basically a BJP office running from Dubai. So I know I'm kind of curious about two things. One is the role of the media, which I know you write about in the piece, and you actually link to this like brilliant piece she did for Wisden, where she like summarizes all the nonsense of the 2023 World Cup. But obviously there's like two other factors here. I suppose this is the last question, and maybe I'll ask one more if it's possible. But there's these two other factors. One is kind of within India, the role, as you said, of like big capital, but also the role of Indian media. That's the one part. And how and Indian media, and I watched a couple of videos this morning after last night's game to see like the post kind of debate. And in one, they had Kapil Dev was on this program, and the two anchors, Kapil Dev was being careful and he was trying to be nice, but the anchors were just repeating like state propaganda. Like to your point about the handshake, Moshe Navni, what's his name? Mohsin
Naqvi, yeah.
Naqvi, they were like making fun of him. Like they portrayed this really as this is Pakistan's fault. Why did Pakistan bring politics into this thing? So there's these two things I'm hoping if you could just break this down, which is the media and the BJP, which is like, I mean, it's the ICC. It's like supposedly a global organization, but it really seems to be very much determined by very local political conditions within India.
Yeah, no, I mean, the media piece is interesting. Even when India and Pakistan, nearly went to this war and they had this 12-day standoff last year, the media was one of the central instigators of this tension, where constantly, unverified news reports, lies about and just like, portrayed as leaks from Indian military, and just trying to ramp up the war, especially after the terrorist attack in Pahalgam. I mean, there was this lull phase which preceded India's response. But in that lull phase, in the so-called lull phase, every day, especially, these BJP leaning news channels, they kept amping up the tensions, spreading propaganda, where diplomacy is completely out of question, but it's only a military and a military response that counts. And for the Indian, obviously for the broadcaster, there's a huge a money-making exercise, but the India-Pakistan clash is also huge for Indian media, because this is how it plays out. From the previous day, you will start getting these unending news broadcasts, 3-hour discussions on the game, but barely talking any cricket, but only talking about its political significance. Then on the day of the match, again, this build-up occurs where even a small thing that may have happened would be then twisted out of proportion to basically create this war-like, atmosphere of India playing Pakistan is not about cricket anymore. So considering that the media is so heavily invested in it, and television news business in India is effectively a loss-making proposition today, one of the only ways that they can still sustain themselves is getting ads on these huge spectacle or on day of these huge events like the India-Pakistan game. So there's this whole political economy, or rather their revenue model is based on creating these kind of tensions and hate, which effectively drive this coverage. Now, Mohsin Naqvi is an interesting character you mentioned because he is the interior minister currently in the Pakistan government. He's also the Asian Cricket Council president, and he is the PCB, the Pakistan Cricket Board chairman. Now, this would, like you say, in the case of FIFA, we've seen this multiple cases where if something like this would be tantamount to, political interference, and even malfunctioning organization like FIFA would probably intervene and suspend a federation. But in the case of cricket, these kind of arrangements have been quite common. And you could see this, in Indian cricket, but also in Pakistan and Sri Lanka. But in England and Australia, it's slightly different because usually it's technocrats and the professional managerial class who get in. They have this kind of veneer or a degree of distance from government, but obviously that doesn't always play out, as we've seen in multiple instances. What's really I think this is something that I've really started to think about especially in the last couple of years, is what marks this BJP moment differently from previous, institutional arrangements in Indian cricket, because, previous governments in power, like say Congress, also had like friendly figures within the cricket board. It's about how the domestic political considerations and especially electoral considerations start determining how and have a huge influence on what's happening in the cricket field. So I'll go back to a very early example, from 2009, when the 2009 elections happened. Because the Indian government could not guarantee enough security for the IPL games, the IPL was played in South Africa because of an Indian election. This was then again repeated in the 2014 election. Now we see, like I've already shared, in the case of this Assam and West Bengal election, it's determining not only what's happening, obviously, in terms of the rising like a right-wing rhetoric, but it's also determining who gets to play in this league. This has previously happened with the two Sri Lankan players were not allowed to play in Chennai Super Kings. This is from 2012. So we see this, especially because of this kind of institutional arrangement where, politics, cinema, and other big capital is intervening and collaborating in this interesting way in the IPL. The IPL becomes the site for the Indian government, especially in this moment when BCCI and BJP are this close, to be able to deploy it for political ends, quite explicitly so. And this has played out. Now, this obviously is at the level of like T20 domestic competitions. Now, internationally, there's obviously, like you say, there's been a chatter over the past, especially 24 hours, that, why does this game take place? There is so much hype to it, never lives up to it. But this whole game is being played basically for effectively money, but also to be, for the ideological end of pitting India against Pakistan in this kind of way. 2023 World Cup. The game was intentionally organized in Ahmedabad, which is the stadium is named after Narendra Modi. And then Pakistani journalists struggled to get visa. There was no question of Pakistani fans. And then you have this 100,000, Indians descending on that ground, chanting, especially this, this chant, which a lot of Hindutva folks have also uttered, which is, this chant of Jai Shri Ram, which they have been recorded to have been saying while carrying out, mob lynching of Muslims in India. And they then create this so the Indian fans are chanting this while Rizwan, the Pakistan wicketkeeper, got out, and as he's walking towards the dressing room. So it was basically this whole atmosphere of, of religious polarization is created through these games. Interestingly, just one final point on this is that, over the last, since 2013 Champions Trophy, every ICC tournament has an India-Pakistan game no matter what. It's right. Predetermined. ICC has admitted it itself. Right. But India and Pakistan have not played a test match since 2007 December. Now, this I think is quite crucial, because I think if there was enough money riding on test cricket today, India and Pakistan would find a way to go and play it in neutral venue. It's increasingly 2020 cricket, and sometimes one day cricket around the World Cup and the Champions Trophy, where there is huge money riding, and because of this amount of, in US dollar terms, I think the ad rates were going for about 75,000 USD for every 10 seconds yesterday. So you have these, insane bets that sponsors and big corporates are ready to make. And this is why this contest take place. There is no to look for cricketing reason and to worry what would happen to the India-Pakistan rivalry if there are these one-sided contests. Actually doesn't get us very close to the picture. It's more about that as long as the money is being made, it doesn't quite matter how the game pans out.
Well, it's in a way also if you don't have games, then with the time lag between games, it means there's more money that you can make because of the anticipation of these two teams because they barely meet, so you make more money off it in the way that it's like a scarcity principle. Okay, because this is the last question. I know we went on longer than we wanted to.
Yeah.
People staring at their phone looking at this little debate. It's not a debate. It's more like you providing really good information. But the last question is, if you could make this one quick and short, maybe just like
sure.
say 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. What's the way out of all of this? Because I started by saying to you, is this decolonization? And you said, nah, it's a sort of, it could be, but it turns out it was like a smokescreen. So how do we get out of this?
One of the reasons why India does not want this game to go to the Olympics is because, it's effectively now in India's playing field, right? Like it can't be pushed out. But now that India has made it, that cricket has made it to the Olympics in 2028, it's still a small tournament. Only the top 6 men's teams and top 6 women's teams will be allowed to play. But if cricket is, let's say, fairly well received and it continues to be an Olympic sport going forward, I would think it would be there in Brisbane because it's Australia. Cricket would be a popular game. And then let's say a number of teams are allowed to play more than 6, like even if you go above 10, a number of other countries will start taking this notice of this as a medal opportunity. And that's when, wealthier countries that India can start thinking about putting out not only cricket teams. Right now we have a 20-team World Cup, and mostly even when teams play, they are teams mainly full of South Asians, diasporic, have heavy on a diasporic membership.
The US team.
It's basically, yeah, they're like H-1B visa of techies from San Francisco. So I think that might be one of the ways out in which the cricket's development as an Olympic sport may change it.
But just before you move on, the only problem with the Olympic one is Christy Coventry, who is originally from Zimbabwe. I did a little piece on 11 and People about sort of what people can expect of her, which is kind of nothing. Like Zimbabweans are disappointed in her. And if you watch her, and I have actually, there's a really nice website, I don't know, I can shout them out, Inside the Games, which is really good at sort of everyday tracking, particularly the IOC and the Olympic Games. And they just reporting, but what emerges out of their coverage is very clear that she's risk averse. She's not interested in principles. This is not the 1970s, the 1960s and 70s where you're kicking South Africa out because of apartheid. She's, we must play nice. She's going to bring Russia back in. She doesn't say anything terrible about Israel. So it's an interesting, how, like you're saying, maybe the Olympics, I'm assuming you don't mean the IOC, the people running the IOC. You think, again, it's like money, the possibility of meddling. I'm not saying meddling, but meddling.
Yeah.
That's going to be the way to undermine this. Is kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's a speculative point at best because we don't quite know how this Olympic tournament will pan out. But cricket's, because even though it's not played by that many nations quite regularly, cricket's economy is so huge that it keeps attracting different kinds of investors. Over the last year, there's been a talk of Saudi Arabia funding, coming together with Cricket Australia and running this Grand Slam style T20 tournament of having 4 tournaments in a year. And it's effectively, it will require someone with greater financial heft to be able to change the power relations, but not necessarily for the better. If Saudi Arabia and Cricket Australia come together, the cricket's not benefiting as much. But T20 seems to be where the golden goose, which nobody can seem to get enough of. This was the case with ODIs in 90s. But the only thing that I guess one can hold hope onto is cricket has changed so much just in our lifetimes, right? 20 years ago,
Hmm.
imagining this game would like the way it stands today would have been completely impossible. But the advent of T20 and the IPL and how much this game has changed, it's not only just in terms of its structure, but it's like social mores and how people relate and understand this game. So it's a fast moving sport, and something of that kind could again happen. But the biggest
Wait,
problem for cricket.
are you just putting a little bit of the hope in the Saudis?
I'm saying that this power relation, especially as it exists, could change, but and it may not, like this game's dependence on India may not be always the case, especially not so much in the Saudis, but actually because this game is so dependent on the environmental conditions, and with the rising temperature, especially the climate crisis, creating this catastrophe, and South Asia being such a huge risk point for cricket to be able to play around the year, being this predictable, having this predictable calendar, and rely on the environment because this game changes so much, depending on the weather. Like India is not in the future the safest bet for this game to grow. So that's another like aspect about which like not much conversation is happening right now. Uh, but I sense that by calling the kind
Okay,
of
hold on again
exposing.
there. But hold on
Yeah,
again. I know we gotta
yeah,
we
yeah.
gotta close this up. But so wait, this is gonna be like when you say environmental conditions, and I'm not saying that point went on from the Saudis and the Australians.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
this about like indoor stadiums, or what are you trying to? What is your kind of? What's your
I
point
mean,
when you say environmental won't allow like you play in India all year round? So where you playing indoor, or you can't play
I
in
think
Australia? They got the fires.
yes, yeah. So and like you could. This is, I think, a particular challenge for like a pre-industrial game like cricket, right? Like because it's so dependent on the weather being reliable. But with IPL, it's a huge problem. I mean, temperatures have broken records in the last two
Yeah.
summers, and this tournament takes place in April and May, which is peak summer. And for cricket to be able to rely that cricketers will come, this is already a problem when they play in winter with the poor air quality in most of northern India. So I'm saying that that with Indian cities being able to host, and then for them all the revenue model that's based on these games taking place in India, and India being the hub of cricket, um, I don't know how, like, its longevity is suspect to me, and how long this can go on. So, but again, it's in the realm of speculation because cricket's current condition only makes you feel grim right now.
Well, I think what I was trying to do is to get us off this
Yeah,
kind of grim ledge. But as
yeah,
you pointing out now, it's like we'd have to have like a lot of hope for the game to go in another direction. And just lastly, so the Caribbean or South Africa, if you're thinking outside of England and Australia, um, their unions are not in a position to do anything about it. They've in a sense sort of, I'm not gonna say been captured, but they're very much dependent on what's going on. Like the Indians are much more powerful than that, right?
yeah, yeah. And this plays out every time. Even when there was a vote in the ICC board to decide on Bangladesh's ouster, only Pakistan voted, and almost at a
Yeah,
political
yeah,
point.
yeah.
They lost the vote 14-2, and everyone just votes in line with India. Yeah, I mean, like the truly hopeful version would be of I think like cricket fans being more influential. But I think the way the BCCI treats its own fans with cops beating them up ahead of games,
And
like
yeah, and it's in your
yeah,
piece the way that the ticket debacle just happened, went on, kept moving. They didn't even apologize, nothing.
no, yeah,
They just
yeah,
keep going. Yeah. Hey, this
yeah,
is great. This was this was it's turned into this like
yeah,
proper interview, but it
yeah,
was mostly. But I really enjoyed your facts. Like your this guy, people go read his pieces on 11 people. This is an ad. Um, especially both. I would say the Ambani's one, which we didn't even talk about. We didn't even talk. You mentioned that class, and we moved on from them quickly. But great piece, Priyansh. I would follow him on Instagram. He's still on Twitter. He's still over there by that cesspool of. So am I occasionally. Um, but yeah, so follow him on Twitter. Well, X is what they call it now. Follow him. He's on IG. And yeah, read him on 11 People. There's no official titles there, but he's writing there regularly. I hope. So
yeah.
great pieces. I appreciate it. If everybody who's watched, I see a couple of people that I know. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, this was an experiment. So thank you. And watch out tomorrow. The End of Sport podcast. Is it tomorrow? Yeah. I'll be
Yes.
on there, like an episode that they recorded recently about AFCON, kind of post AFCON and what AFCON's all about and means and the politics of the World Cup and so on. So I'm on there. Yeah. So look out for that.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
No.
Take it easy,
Yeah.
brother. This was
Yeah.
good.
Thank you,
See
Sean.
you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Chat soon.
Good to see
Bye.
you. Okay. Bye.